Hello and welcome to FMI's Built-In Podcast. I'm Scott Winstead, FMI Consulting President. I'm really excited to share my conversation with Nate Koetje with you today. Nate is the CEO of FC, a full-service electrical contractor headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan. His primary focus is setting the vision and the strategy to position FC for profitable long-term growth. And over the last 20-plus years, Nate has served in a number of roles of increasing responsibility within the business, stepping into the COO role in 2008 and then transitioning to CEO in 2013. Since then, he's led the continued evolution of FC's solution offerings while also expanding the company's geographic footprint. And the results speak for themselves. Since 2008, FC has grown from roughly $20 million in revenue and 125 employees in a single state presence to a $200 million business with 600 employees operating across multiple states, with about half of its revenue now coming from outside of the state of Michigan. In this conversation, we explore the leadership lessons and decisions behind that growth, what it really means to build a field-first culture, how to think about operational excellence as a system, and why being a disciplined capital allocator matters more now than ever. Please enjoy my conversation with Nate Koetje. Well, Nate, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here. Excited to have you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Scott. I'm looking forward to it.
So I'd love to kick off with your origin story, but I know you're not a big fan of talking about yourself. So I was thinking maybe we go with a bit of a true-false question.
Sure, let's do it.
So legend has it that when you got hired into FC 26 years ago, you were a recently married unemployed social worker.
Yeah, so you can imagine my in-laws were super impressed at my wife's selection of her lifelong mate. Yeah, I think maybe the origin story gets exaggerated a bit over time, but those things were certainly true. I had recently graduated, recently been married, and needed a job.
You're motivated, in other words.
No doubt.
So given that backdrop, what drew you into construction and ultimately what got you to FC?
Yeah, so I had worked in residential construction, think summers, weekends, from age 16 all the way through college. It would probably be an exaggeration to call myself a carpenter, but I was on the other end of a hammer for most of that time and candidly just really loved life on a job site. So after wrapping up the now infamous social work degree, I really was just looking to get back to that job site environment. It was an environment that I was familiar with and comfortable with. And it's not like I came into the industry with some grand plan. Candidly, I needed a job and I liked the work.
Very good. So before we get too far into it, would love to just get a snapshot of FC today. So what do you guys build? Where do you operate? How would you describe the business today as it stands?
Yeah, so FC is a commercial industrial electrical contractor with 600 or so total employees. We're headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 2 additional satellite offices in Michigan. And then we also have offices in Nashville, Tennessee, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Charleston, South Carolina. Our revenues are about 50-50. So like 50% of our revenue is in the state of Michigan, kind of our original home turf. And 50% is in the Southeast between Nashville, Charlotte, and Charleston. I might describe that as our new home turf in that we do some selective travel for specific clients, but we really aspire to be the top local contractor in each region that we're in versus being seen as a large national who's coming in. So we pick carefully those geographies and then we intend to stay forever.
That's great. So how big is the organization today? Headcount, rough revenue, if you're comfortable sharing. And then I'd love to go back to even 5-10 years ago and kind of do a contrasting from to.
So we're about 600 employees today, revenue wise, in the neighborhood of 200 million a year. And if I do a little from to, one of our demarcations, if you will, is the construction recession of 2008-9. So coming out of that, we were roughly 20 million in annual revenue, and I'll just approximate, say 125 employees or so.
Quite a transformation to go from 20 million to 200 and 125 to 600.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a journey with a lot of great people contributing a lot of great things along the way.
So if you had to bottle up the secret sauce of FZ and what makes you all different and truly unique, what would that be?
I'm not sure that I would say that there is or we have a secret sauce. And I say that only because it gives the impression that somehow if you can get your hands on this secret sauce, things will magically happen. I think maybe, Scott, we're more of a combination of ingredients over the years that we continue to kind of tweak and adjust. It's taken us a while to get that mix right. And I imagine that we're always adjusting as things change around us. But I think there's maybe four things in our recipe, if you will, that I don't know if they make us unique, but they make us certainly proud of who we are. So those things are, we've got this element of this blue collar, entrepreneurial spirit of just grit and determination that runs through everybody at FC, from first year apprentice all the way through our leadership team. We have a purpose that we've put a stake in the ground around beyond profit. So we exist for things maybe greater than profit. We need profit to achieve those things, of course, but we talk about our purpose here at FC as having a positive impact on the lives of people, and that starts with our field craft employees. Third in that recipe would be financial discipline. So trying to walk this line of being a good capital allocator without being frivolous or somehow too cheap in terms of where we invest and how we spend. And then the last one is just this relentless focus for us on our core processes, not very creatively. We call those things here the FC way. But the mix of all of that, the mix of this grit and determination, a purpose beyond profit, financial discipline, and then just this daily focus on operational processes from project selectivity all the way through project closeout. I think that combination is what maybe makes us unique, or at least has allowed us to experience some degree of success over time.
It's the saying that tough times are great teachers. And so kind of inverting the four ingredients that you talked about and some of the things that we talked about in terms of maybe lessons learned. So if we could pivot and talk about that in more detail. So if you think about it, every company has chapters that really test it in their life cycle, in their journey. Curious for you all at FC and you and your leadership of FC, which were the ones, if you could point to a few, were the hardest to live through? And what do those moments really teach you?
Yeah, certainly. I'm not sure that any stage is harder than another. I think they all teach us something. And in some ways, maybe you have to go through them. I'm not sure about other people's journey. I will only say that I certainly had to go through them. Maybe a little bit like parenting for those of us that have had the privilege of doing that, where every stage of parenting has its absolute challenges and agonies and absolute joys at the same time. We tend to look back at the prior stage with fondness, though we didn't feel very fond while we were in that stage. For us, that journey's been similar. So when you're the CEO of the organization, often the company's journey follows your own. So there's just some mix of FZ's journey into these phases and certainly paralleling my own. And so only in hindsight are you able, or am I able to identify these phases? It's not like when we were in them. So if I think about the first one was this entrepreneurial risk taking, at no point in that stage did I think we're in the entrepreneurial risk taking stage. Instead, it was just like this chaos of get work, do work, not a lot of structure, system, or process. We probably took on some projects we shouldn't have taken on. We probably took on some customers that we had no business trying to do work for. But certainly you learn something through that. It becomes part of the DNA of the culture. So as we shift maybe out of that, there's this moment leadership wise where it dawns on me, and I think the business, like it's too much, like something's amiss here. And we pivot a bit to what I would only now call phase two, which is this kind of culture is king phase. And I want to tread lightly here because I know there's a lot of people will say, yes, culture is king. And I'm not saying it's not. But for a number of years, all I talked about was like purpose, core values over and over again. And I'm not saying those things aren't important. Like they are, but we would have done well. There's a nonprofit saying, maybe this goes back to my social work degree, called No Money, No Mission. And somehow in this kind of culture is king phase, which might have lasted 5, 7 years, where that's all I was preaching and teaching. And consequently, the company kind of followed suit. I think we forgot how to make money. We forgot about like the core fundamentals of the business. And our results were average at best. And if I'm being totally honest, and this is clearly just you and I talking here, Scott, below average more often than we would have liked to have seen. So we go from entrepreneurial, kind of all adrenaline, to culture's king, to now just frustrated with our results. Like we feel like we're doing all the things you're supposed to do, and yet the results aren't there. So we pivot. And as I would say, I have had a tendency to do, regrettably, in my own leadership journey, over rotating is one of the things I can do best. So we pivot to kind of this financial discipline, which sounds good. However, our financial discipline was really about just being frustrated. And so I think about the things I know today about what really drives results in a construction company. Financial discipline around return on invested capital, yes. Improving productivity, yes. Ensuring our craft workforce has the tools and equipment and information they need to be successful, yes. Unfortunately, those weren't the things we were focused on. Instead, we were like, no more candy in the office. Instead, we were moving kind of the deck chairs around, if you will, on the proverbial Titanic and not getting to what we actually had to get to. So bringing, again, mind you, these phases only sound neat and clean now that we're quarter century later and can look back on them. So you go from this entrepreneurial grit to culture's king to financial discipline to really over the last probably 7 years, recognizing all those things are important. Those three we need elements of, but then layering into that this mindset of the process is the goal. And so this goes back to the FZ way and really drawing our attention to just the core fundamental processes that are non-negotiable for FZers across every branch. This isn't every process. So we have a handful that we say, like, these are the deal breakers. We've been known to say at times, you can do it any way you want, as long as it's just like this. And it creates a consistent experience for our employees, for our customers, and consequently, much more consistent financial results. So not leaving any of those prior phases behind. Again, I think all of them become part of your DNA. And we've hit a maturity, or maybe more candidly, maybe I've hit a leadership maturity that allows us to understand that all of them come together. Maybe I'll close this section with a statement that one of your colleagues, Tyler Perret, shared with me. So we were talking about this processes, and combining these elements together. And I made the statement that the construction industry is a brutal teacher. Right? Our industry does not have a lot of grace. It gives you a lot of feedback, but it's very direct and painful feedback at the time. And his comment to me was, these processes and this culture and the mix of these things, they don't guarantee success, but they can simply help tilt the odds in your favor. And I love that because we are going to step in it from time to time. We always do. And so will most companies. But focusing on kind of the basics just increases your chances of success by some small element.
There are several things you said in there, Nate, that I love, and shout out to Tyler. But I think this might be James Clear talks about, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems or your processes. There's a lot of folks in organizations that conflate the two. Having goals is good, but having the process to achieve the goals are critical. You have to have both. Both are important, but you usually don't achieve the goal if you don't have the processes and you don't consistently follow the processes, which is the unsexy part of the equation, right? It's
No doubt.
the daily slog and the daily grind to kind of just get it done and persevere.
We talk a fair amount here. We use language like the process is the goal. And just to keep ourselves focused on exactly as you're talking about, like, so big dreams. I might say things like dream big, act small. Big dreams are important because they do inspire us, right? They keep us going through the tough times. But as soon as you have that big dream, in some ways, like land the plane and get back to like the boring work of implementing these day-to-day processes. We've gone through times, candidly, where we haven't even looked at our financial results in order to send this message that the process is what produces the results. The results are a lagging indicator, a result of work that may have been done 6, 12, 18, 24 months ago. And the part we can control are just the daily grind of doing these same methodical things the same way, day after day after day. Not fun, but the results can be fun.
Since you're on video, you can't swing at me. I may quote Nick Saban here, since you're a University of Michigan guy, but talks a lot about be where your feet are and focus on. Talks about the process, right? And it's all about, what is your assignment on this play right now? What's happening in front of you right now? Own that, and your other 10 teammates will own that. And then you don't have to look at the scoreboard. It takes care of itself. It's very similar philosophy.
No
Not to
doubt.
not to devolve into coach speak here, but
And
it's
even as a Wolverine, even I can maybe learn something from Nick Saban. Thank you.
earmuffs, right? Don't tune it out. Just so much to unpack with the four phases, Nate. And honestly, I could probably safely say that a good percentage of the industry that we are a part of could say that the same thing, that they've either experienced all four or certainly pieces and parts of those four phases that you described. And
Yeah, again, I'm hesitant to act like I have answers or at FZ we've somehow figured it out. But when you look backwards, there are these like critical moments that stand out. And maybe other leaders recognize when they're in them. As I reflected, I'm not sure I always did. I think you're just solving the next problem in front of you. So like big things for FZ over the last 25 years. So mind you, I didn't found it. So our founders kind of took us from maybe 1980, think, to the early 2000s or so and gave us a great foundation, Marlon Feyen and Bob Zylstra, to build on. From there, so my recollection is from my leadership moment started to happen in like 2005, 2006. But the moments that stand out for me are, one, we made a decision really based on that construction recession we talked about earlier to diversify the business. And we chose geographic diversity. We had an operation here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We had a small outpost in northern Michigan, and we really pushed to go into new geographies. You and I have joked over time that everything's strategic in hindsight. So, like, how do you pick these locations? I had a mentor that told me, make sure you're a plane ride away, not a car ride away, or you're probably in the same economy. So we followed customers, and ultimately that led us to Nashville and Charleston and Charlotte. But certainly that was a crucible moment for us. I think putting a stake in the ground around purpose beyond profit, and for us that's a focus on the field. But I think putting a stake in the ground around our purpose, like we exist to have a positive impact on the lives of people, and that starts with our employees, particularly our craft employees. I think that was a crucible moment because we come back to it all the time. I love the idea that to be the best electrical contractor, you need the best electricians. And we intend to have the best electricians. But in order to attract them, you've got to be the best place to work. So we're constantly working hard to put our field first. And then lastly, this whole retrenching around operational excellence. So that happened somewhere during the COVID era, was kind of this deep breath. Where are we at? What are we doing? I would say as we were coming out of COVID, but I think it was somewhere in the middle that really happened, that we recognized the need to retrench around those things. So I'm sure there's a million more decisions. If you were to ask other FZers, that they would call out. Those are the three that stand out for me. This idea of diversify through geographic expansion, put a stake in the ground on purpose, and then really anchoring to these core processes.
If you had to, hindsight being what it is, dissect what were the critical success factors or the real drivers of success, and how you can say today portfolio is pretty even
Yeah.
outside of Michigan. And so how did you get to this point, and what would you point to as the biggest things that contributed to it?
Yeah, without being overly maybe cheeky about it, it's always people. So I think finding the right leadership. So we have never done an acquisition, always greenfield. And there was always a mix of following a customer. So you weren't coming in completely unfamiliar. Follow a customer, find the right people, go slow. We talk a lot about not chasing revenue. So we didn't have like a number we were trying to hit. Most of our work candidly sells. We sell work by doing good work. And so making sure that once you follow that customer, known from maybe Michigan, a project, do a great job, and then you're out trying to find the best talent. But certainly, like, things rise and fall with leadership in these geographies. And maybe the other thing I'd say is no matter what plan we put together, no matter how complicated or simple the business plan, when we've decided to go start up, we're always roughly 100% wrong on how long it's going to take to make it happen. It is literally always twice as long. So if we think in 5 years we ought to look like X, well, we probably should think 10, right? Or in 2 years, I would imagine we're going to be doing Y. It's probably going to be in 5 years we're going to be doing Y. It just is. It's just hard work.
It's what's the philosopher Mike Tyson that said, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, no doubt.
To your point, it always takes longer than you think it will, and just to kind of come back to process. And I like what you said about, there's not a revenue goal. We intentionally want to go slow. We want to get the infrastructure and the scaffolding built right, and then we'll build from there. But if the goal is a revenue or an outcome, then you're failing every day until you get to that point. If your goal is something else that's more process, something you can measure every day, where you can stack wins and see momentum build, it's a way to kind of rally the troops to prevent the knee jerk to say, oh my gosh, we've got to go just buy a job because, the home office is going to start to get on us if we're not revenue or income positive within X time period.
No doubt.
You touched on something a minute ago, Nate, that I do want to come back to as well. Just this notion of being field first and how critical that is to attracting and keeping the best electricians. Can you say more about what that looks like inside FC?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea there is just this recognition around we get paid to do one thing and one thing only as an electrical contractor, and that's install work safely and correctly the first time. We've tried to install it the second and third time. The economics don't make sense when we get it wrong. And so really rallying the entire business around that and ensuring we all understand, like, my job is to support that craft professional in the field, right? The project manager's job is to support the craft professional in the field. I don't make any profit for the business, and we can't achieve the purpose we've laid out without profit. And so it's a constant reminder. We tend to solve the problem in front of us. And for those of us that sit behind a desk or in an office, it's easy to forget where the real work is happening. So that might look like very clear expectations for how often our office folks, whether that's project managers that aren't based on a site or somebody on our people services team, are required to walk job sites, to spend time with our electricians, to get a sense for how challenging it is out there, and just keeping this relentless push to how's it going to impact the field? How's it going to impact the field? How's it going to impact the field? And it's just a constant drumbeat for all of us. Sometimes perhaps our project managers don't love me standing in front of them and telling them they're not the most important, but it takes a little bit of that too. And I think we all understand it becomes ingrained in us that's the deal. Getting our folks the right information at the right time so they can install work safely and correctly the first time, like, that is the deal for us.
That's great. You mentioned Tyler Prey earlier. We have an entire practice that preaches that, and you can definitely tell the culture when it's palpable when you walk into a place, and if that is words on a poster or if that's authentic and how everybody kind of shows up. You touched on something else that would be great to go back to as well, just this notion of operational excellence in this journey. And I know you never want to declare victory because, there's always another level, but how would you describe the journey you've been on and where would you say that you'd like to take it next?
Yeah, I think maybe you could sense where I might take that question. I don't think you do ever arrive. And we talk the construction industry as a brutal teacher, right? So as soon as we've perfected it, then we'll celebrate that we've arrived. And that will never happen, right? So we like better has no finish line. And I don't mean to use that as a stick, right? We celebrate our successes. We celebrate where we once were to where we are, but it is this constant retraining and retrenching around operational processes. So construction is dynamic, environments are dynamic, things change all the time. By focusing on those processes, it gives us some sense of control too. So there's a lot of variables in our industry we don't control. And by just continuously coming back, so how's our pre-job planning process? And not are we checking the box, but like, what does it really look like? Like, sit in a pre-job planning meeting and are we getting to the meat of it? So, I mean, I honestly, I think I don't see the whole industry. Well, where are we compared to where I think we could be if we're on a scale of 1 to 10? Maybe we're a 6, maybe a 7. I think people, humanity, not just FCers, discipline can be a challenge at times, right? We tend to fall back on our laurels. And so it requires this kind of just constant reinforcement or like beating the drum around this. You might think of it like physical fitness as an example. So imagine you had asked the question like, Nate, how are you feeling about your physical fitness? Good enough to stop focusing on it? And I was like, yep, pretty sure I've got it. I'm thinking about that double cheeseburger and that ice cream tonight. Well, all of a sudden, 3 days from now, I got a problem and I've got to retrench. What we want here is to always be focused on it so we don't have a problem, so we don't have to retrench. But as we were talking about earlier, it's the little things day after day after day after day. And it's sometimes not that exciting. It's not the adrenaline you get from, putting out a fire. It's just ensuring you don't have a fire.
Exactly, exactly. The preemptive. I think this may be Bill Gates. I can't remember where I read it, but this notion of success as a lousy teacher, it can seduce smart people into thinking they can't lose. And so I definitely understand your perspective on not ever wanting to kind of spike the ball in the end zone and thinking you got it all figured out. So something you touched on earlier, I think it was when you were talking about your kind of the four ingredients, but this notion of being a good capital allocator. Would love to hear a little bit more about growth strategy and not necessarily what they are, but when you're thinking about, do we choose door A or door B? What's the filter that you run those types of decisions through?
So if I get really tactical on that, we're a project-based business. It is about selecting, we have some great general contractors we work with, and we have some great end users that we work with. And it is about working your way through a filter for those folks around their growth, right? Hooking yourself to the right train, if you will, that's going to take you somewhere. Their value system. Do they see us as a partner? How do we interact with them? How do our folks in the field align with their folks in the field? So that's maybe very tactical. I'm afraid you might be disappointed in my answer here, because if you said, what's your growth strategy? I would tell you, oh, we don't have a growth strategy. We grow. So if we go back over a 25-year period, and average it out. Now it's construction, so it's lumpy. But if we smooth that out, we may have a compound annual growth rate between 10 and 15% over a 15-year period. But most of those growth is finding us. We're getting pulled into growth versus hunting growth. And this might go back to some early lessons learned for me when I've chased results, if you will, or caused our business to, it didn't go that well. And so we do good work and our customers pull us into new opportunities, maybe larger opportunities, perhaps larger projects or projects in a new geography. And we follow them through. We work hard to stay disciplined on this go, no go process, building relationships with the right people. But we don't have a strategy that necessarily says this is how we're going to grow. Outside of we want the right customers, they got to treat our folks well. We're not going to chase revenue, and we're going to stay disciplined to our own processes. And through that, we've had better growth, I would say, through that than back in maybe the days of me, not knowing what I didn't know and just trying to hunt growth.
It's all about positioning, right? Your growth may find you, but you have to be in a good position to take advantage of it. If you're not in a good position, you don't have the options, and then you're forced into choices that you don't really want to be forced into.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So if I think of the mission critical boom that we're in the midst of right now, right? We've been fortunate to participate in some of that, but it's not as if a decade ago I thought, you know what, we need to position the business for this upcoming AI mission critical boom. Now, some people in our industry did. I know that for a fact. They're much smarter, right, than what I am. We were brought to it because our customers brought us into it, right? So we might have been doing some great industrial manufacturing work that was complicated with tight schedules, tough lead times. And our success there led us to, hey, would you guys be willing to dip your toe in the water on this? And we try in those situations to err on the side of yes, known customer, known relationship. We think we have the skill sets. And so, yeah, I don't mean to act like we're falling into it. I think there is some strategy there in being well positioned for those things when they happen, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've touched a lot on culture throughout the conversation. I know it's something you're very passionate about, as are your fellow leaders at FC. But as you grow and as you go on this journey that you've been on since 2008 to take it from 20 to 200, as well as add the number of people that you have, culture is easy to talk about. It's hard to get it right. And it's really hard to get it right as you're scaling and growing consistently and compounding like you're talking about. So if you would maybe talk a little bit about how do you build it with intention and how do you stay true to it?
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, most of these lessons come out of getting it right sometimes and wrong other times, and then repivoting and retrenching. Maybe I'd start with first how we think about culture. And we have a lot of cultural reinforcing posters on walls, in job trailers, on gang boxes. And I don't want to take away from those things because I think they are important reminders, but it can't stop there. Like true culture are the behaviors that you tolerate over the course of time. And it begins to set this expectation. It's the unwritten rules. Now, having a poster that says the process is the goal, which we have everywhere, or a reminder that we put our field first, those are good reminders, but they have to reflect reality. They don't create reality. So over time, maybe what we've learned is that first, all teams, whether that's me as the CEO here at FZ, or a regional or branch leader, or a project leader, a superintendent or foreman in the field, all teams grow to reflect their leader. And you can't stop that. That is how it's going to go. So I've been at FC a long time. In many ways, FC becomes a reflection of the things I like about myself and the things I don't always appreciate about myself, because over time, those are the very things that people develop. So getting the right leaders culturally matters. Now, maybe how to do that is a little bit like the ingredients we were talking about on the front end. Not any one of us is perfect, but I think understanding that culture in a branch, in a region, on a job is going to grow to reflect that leader, and then being clear what the non-negotiables are, right? Whether that be setting clear expectations around, here at FC, it would be like around core values, like our actionable behavior-based core values, setting those expectations and then holding people accountable to them. And accountability can look like a lot of things, but as a leader, you've got to be really engaged with those you're leading to be able to see their behaviors. Right. So I say often here at FZ, we lead with our boots on. Like the true testament of our culture is spending time with our folks out in the field. And what does it feel like to work here from their perspective? Having these non negotiables, setting clear expectations, holding people accountable, being close enough to the work to see what reality looks like, I think helps. You never get it perfect. Maybe the last thing I'd say on that, Scott, is just maybe a reminder, just like the conversation around process, the work never stops. So as soon as you take your eye off from it, it's going to atrophy and it's going to drift away from you. And so it's this constant, whether it's culture or process, but just this constant kind of nurturing along of folks, ensuring they understand the expectations. When they fall outside of the boundaries, nudging them back, having a conversation with them. Maybe those conversations sometimes are parental, like help me understand, lead with a question. But ultimately, you're always modifying your own behavior and the team's behavior to fit within these cultural boundaries.
I think this was maybe Shane Parrish, who I read and listen to quite a bit, but I think it was him that talked about if you want to know what somebody thinks about themselves, understand the narrative that they tell themselves about themselves. And so, a lot of times you can get at that through like asking good questions about, and then you can see how somebody could come to the behavior or the action that they may have done. And it makes the conversation a lot more productive than kind of interrogation. But you talked about, just the importance of selecting and developing the right leaders. Love for you to say more about what do you look for to determine if this person's got the goods to be a great leader?
Yeah, I wish I had a formula that I could share with you. You're looking for maybe some core personality traits, right? So for us, you'd start with our core values. So you'd start with, are they a person of integrity? Are they a we first or a me first person? What's the emotional intelligence like? How do they navigate conflict? How do they deliver feedback? And so paying attention to how people respond to pressure and before they're in a huge pressure cooker tells us something. So you've got kind of this value system. Who are they as a person? And then I might marry that up with grit, determination. I'll say things like you got to want it, or there's times you have to do hard things and you have to tell yourself there's no off ramp. Like there's only one way, and that's through. So I think we've talked a lot, maybe pop culture, pop business culture, has talked a lot about grit in the last, maybe 5 years or so. But it's simply overcoming adversity and being willing to just lean in and stick with something long enough that you can solve it. And there's indicators of that along everyone's leadership journey, right? So a good chunk of our folks that are in leadership positions around FZ have come out of the field. And those folks have been honing those skills since they were first year apprentices. How are they responding to a light fixture that doesn't fit in the space it was supposed to fit into? How are they responding to a difficult conduit bend that doesn't quite lay out the way a drawing said it was supposed to lay out? All the way up to how are they navigating economic hardship for the corporation as a whole? So I don't know, go back to the question of like, what do you look for? I don't think there's a magic formula. I don't think leaders are necessarily born, right? Are they coachable? Are they willing to learn from everyone? Are they hungry for their own career? I think Patrick Lencioni had this hungry, humble, smart. And at the risk of just repeating him, I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? Where he talks about smart, like people smart. How are they navigating conflict? How do they set goals? So we talk a lot about setting clear expectations and holding people accountable. Doing that is an art because people are unique. So watching someone's style from how they lead on a job site to how they lead as a project manager to then maybe a group leader to then maybe a director and so on and so forth. All of those things take time to develop.
Just the notion of adversity, and great leaders have had their share of it. They've got the scar tissue to prove it, but they learn from it. And to your point about observing how they behave when going through it is a really good tell for how they'll handle it when it comes again. Because as you said earlier, the construction industry is the construction industry, right? It's not all going to go per plan most of the time.
Yeah, if you don't have a problem now, you will, right? You're going
Right.
to deal with a technical problem, a people problem, and it just becomes like your profession. I would say in many ways, like where I sit at FC, much of what I do every day is simply conflict resolution over and over, right? And over. So you certainly, as you lead in our industry, you have to have an aptitude for that.
Well, and also the antibodies for it, right? So there's two ways to look at that, as a problem or an opportunity, right? Not to get too corny and cliched, but it does change the outcome a lot of times depending on how you go into it, thinking about it. Well, Nate, this has been a great conversation. I want to be very respectful of your time. I know how busy you are. I do have one last question that I tend to try to ask everyone, and that would be just one of advice and reflection. I know you don't take a whole lot of time to look back and kind of reflect, but if you could go back to 26 years ago when you were the unemployed, just recently married social worker as you joined FC, if you could give yourself one piece of advice knowing what you know today back then, what would that be?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question and the chance to think about that. We've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's this idea of being willing to dream big and at the same time act small. So the concept that chasing results are a distraction to the very processes that will give you the results you're after. This is true in life. This is true in business. The idea that yes, you need goals and aspirations, right? Sure, they help, they inspire us, but it is the boring, methodical things every single day that get you there. So, yeah, I'd sum it up with if someone had told me earlier in my career, dream big, I didn't have a problem with that part. I didn't lack aspiration. It was the act small that I think could have saved me a fair amount of heartache over the last 25 years or so.
I love that answer. That's a great place to end the conversation, Nate. It's great words to live by. And again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity.
And to our listeners, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of FMI's Built-In Podcast, and for joining our community of leaders committed to building organizations that endure. We hope this conversation gave you a few practical ideas to take back to your respective teams, whether that's around operational excellence and the process discipline required to achieve it, what it looks like to truly put the field first, or how to think more intentionally about market positioning and capital allocation. As always, thank you for listening, and please remember to like or subscribe so you don't miss an upcoming episode.